Hey, good morning. Imagine if you could have free treats at Dairy Queen unlimited. When I was 14, it was my first job. I actually turned in my application when I was 13, about a week earlier, and I was hoping that I'd get hired, and I did. $4.25 an hour was minimum wage when I started at Dairy Queen, but the biggest perk was free treats when we worked. And my favorite treat was the Blizzard. I like a Snicker Blizzard, and our Dairy Queen did not serve Snicker Blizzards. So on my break, I would run across the street to the Super America gas station. I would buy a king-size Snicker bar. I would come back and I'd cut up it in little pieces, and I would make my own Blizzard so I could have it just the way I want. Turn to the person next to you, what's your favorite Blizzard? And maybe next time you go, maybe next time you go, you'll order it the way my friend does, where you say, give me an obscene amount of toppings, try to offend me. 10 seconds. Did anybody say Snicker like me? Okay, our most popular back then were Oreo and M&Ms, and then, you guys, cookie dough came out. And I got busted because I used to go back into the walk-in freezer to refill our toppings and stuff, and when I was in there, I would sneak a handful of cookie dough, put it in my mouth. But what I didn't realize was there's kind of like a powdery thing on the outside of the cookie dough balls. So when I would come out of the freezer, I'd have powdered sugar all around my mouth. And I got busted. The owner said, Tom, I hope you enjoyed that cookie dough. If I see that on your mouth again, it'll be the last day you work here. So I never, ever did that again. I need a cabin counselor guy who's not afraid of ice. Okay. All right, and this is Jacob. All right, Jacob, for starters, maybe we'll just have you go like down this black line back a ways. So at Dairy Queen, we were open year-round, but in Minnesota, it gets really, really cold in the winter, and people don't think a lot about ice cream. So on our shifts, sometimes there'd be hours that go by with no customers coming in the door. And because there's no customers coming in the door, there's no food to prepare, there's no floors to mop, there's no tables to clean. So we would have to find ways to entertain ourselves. And one of the ways that we entertained ourselves is we'd stand behind the counter and we'd reach in and we'd take some ice out of the ice dispenser and we'd pick targets out in the dining room. And there were these lights that would hang from the ceiling over the tables, but like the light pole is real skinny, like about as skinny as that stick. And it was probably about as far as you are right here. You're about to get pegged with ice, Dan. And so we would practice. Oh, I missed. Okay, you guys might want to cover your heads or something. Did I get it? I got close. I'm going to try two more. Oh, no. This is a real big one. Oh, that would have hit. You put your hand in the way. Okay, good job. Thank you. Thank you so much. We had to invent games like that, and we would throw so much ice that by the time we were done, we had more work to do because we have to go out and mop the floors. It was hard to hit those little targets. We could have picked a big target like the wall or the ceiling, but we picked those challenging ones, and it was hard to pick. Today, we're going to talk about our problem with sin. But first, I want to define the word sin. How do we know what sin is? In the archery world, has anyone done archery up here? There's a term in archery called sin, and it's when you miss the mark. So we have a bullseye that we're trying to hit, and it doesn't really matter if it's the outer yellow or if it's the red or the blue or the black or the white or if it misses altogether. There's not degrees of sin. You just missed it. You missed the mark. Sometimes sin, when we talk in a spiritual sense or in our Christian faith sense, sometimes sin is intentional on our parts, and sometimes it's unintentional on our parts. I'll tell you a time when I intentionally sinned and the consequence that happened with it. When I was in 7th grade, I missed the bus to go to school, so my mom had to drive me, and she was not happy about it. It was winter, it was 6:45 in the morning, it was snowy, lots of traffic, and so the whole way to school, we were kind of arguing and kind of giving silent treatment, going back and forth with those two different things. And when we finally got to the curb, she wasn't really speaking to me anymore, and I thought, I'm going to just stick it to her. I'm going to let her know that she was not very helpful this morning. So, on my way out the door, I reached over, and you guys, we had like this big boat kind of station wagon with the wood paneling, and we never, ever, ever had nice cars. But this was the nicest car we had had. It was the first one that had electric windows, and it was the first one that had fancy stereo, and it was the first one that had like seats that move back and forth without using your muscles. So I leaned over on my way out, and I took the volume on the stereo, and I turned it all the way to the top, just to blast the music. And what happened was, you just heard this pop. I blew up the speakers. So, of course, I got in trouble. Of course, you guys, the rest of the time we had that car, we had no music. I busted the speakers because I intentionally was trying to do something I shouldn't be doing. I wasn't honoring my mom. I missed the mark. I sinned. It was a choice. It was even premeditated. But that consequence stayed with me for a long time, and that consequence affected other people. Everyone who rode in the car didn't have music. There was a time when I was a little bit older, and I would say I unintentionally sinned. But in retrospect, and even right away, do you ever do something and right away you realize it was a mistake? Like, you didn't try to do it, but then right away, it's not hard to figure out it was a mistake. It was my first time ever being a cabin counselor. And I was probably like 16. I think I was a junior counselor. And the guys in our cabin were only a couple years younger than me, but they loved to roughhouse, and they loved to push all their bunk beds to the side of their room, put all mattresses on the floor, have a big wrestling ring, and they loved to have competitions and do all kinds of stuff like that. And so this kid, Reed, was like one of my favorite kids because he was so funny. He reminded me of a little brother. And we were doing a game, and everyone's wrestling, and I pinned him down, and I did that thing that big brothers do sometimes in a playful way. You know that thing when they're got you pinned down and they go, and they start to, and then at the last second they, do you know what I'm talking about? So I did it. It was funny. Reed laughed. Everyone laughed. So I did it again. And it was funny. And everyone laughed. And I did it again. And the snot yuck thing broke and landed on top of Reed's eye. And in that moment, I knew for 100 reasons I blew it. And Reed just kind of like went back over to his bunk and turned to the wall, and I could hear him sniffling like he was crying. You guys, I wanted to die. I mean, I wanted to go home and never be a cabin counselor again and never work with kids because only, that was a horrible, horrible mistake that should have never, ever happened. I didn't know how to make it up to read. I apologized. The rest of the week, I carried his backpack for him. I went up and I got his food and I bust his table. I was trying to make it right because it was an accident, but it was wrong. And I learned from it. I haven't done that again. That was taking something a little bit too far. So maybe you can relate that sometimes when we miss the mark, it's because we're actually setting out to do what we want to do even though we know it's wrong. And other times when we miss the mark, it's kind of our human nature, like, hey, we make mistakes. We're going to all screw up. If you have your Bible with you, would you please open it up to Romans 3:23. Okay, Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Right away, just let those words kind of drip over you. It's telling us we're all in the same condition. We're all in the same boat. We're not perfect until this one day that we make this mistake and now we're a sinner. We're not better because we grew up in church and our family was a Christian and grandma taught us memory verses and we got our Awana badges. We're all in the same boat, even sweet, cute, fat little Chunk. He won't share his food with me. I'll say, hey, can Tom have one of your Goldfish crackers? And he'll take the whole package and just shove it in his mouth. Like, selfish, born selfish. We are born with the sin nature, and the Bible tells us all of us have that. I want to do an experiment here and have you stand or sit after I describe something. So I just want to do a little survey on what you think. I'm going to compare a donut and a car. Is it worse to steal a donut or is it worse to steal a car? If you think donut, stand up. Which one's worse, to steal a donut or to steal a car? Donut, stand up. All right, have a seat. Is it worse to swear in sports or swear in church? If you think church, stand up. All right. Have a seat. Is it worse to kick a locker or kick a puppy? If you think puppy, stand up. Only a nasty, nasty person would kick a puppy, right? All right, you can have a seat. I need 4 volunteers who can come up here and be my sign holders. I'm going to pick you at random. If you catch the ball, you can please come up here. All right, my 4 sign holders. And they're going to do something that involves all of you. I'll get your names first. All right, first sign holder, what's your name?
Truman.
Truman, what city are you from?
Westboro, Wisconsin.
Long way away. Okay, Truman. And this is?
Thiessen.
And where are you from?
Marshfield.
Wonderful. And over here?
I'm Rylan, and I'm from Wausau, Wisconsin.
All right.
I'm Evie, and I'm from Mount Horeb, Wisconsin.
Nice. Okay. You guys can drop your koosh balls on the stage. That's fine. And I've got 4 posters here that have different things that could get us in trouble at camp. Okay? So the first one is cheat during the night game. Cheating during the night game, that is something that we do not want you to do. It makes the game not as fun. It could spoil it for everyone else. So we will have you hold that in front of you just like you're doing. Okay, the next one. Punch your cabin leader in the face. Punch your cabin leader in the face. That is not very nice. That will get you in big time trouble. That would definitely be missing the mark. The next one, sneaking away. Sneaking away from your cabin, sneaking off into the woods, sneaking down the trail. And we'll have you hold that one, please. Other side. And finally, having your phones out, like, let's say, when I'm speaking or during cabin time. All right. So now, you guys, will you line up here kind of side by side and hold those in front of you so everyone can see. So we'll have you come down a little bit like that. Okay, hold that a little higher. Hold that a little lower like that. Now what I'm going to do is one by one stand behind them, and you guys get like 3 seconds to direct them to move. We want to line these up worst to least worst, okay? So like, what's the one that's going to, just the worst thing you could possibly do at camp, and you guys are going to cheer. So maybe they're in perfect order, maybe they're not. You got to tell this guy right here, stay put or move. Keep moving. Keep moving. Okay, stay. Okay, so you stay right there. Now, same thing here. Let's have you scoot down a little ways. There we go. Do we have the right order yet? Worst to least worst. Okay, so let's see. This person right here, should she go right or left? Like that, all the way? All right. How about this person right here, right or left? Left? More again? More? Okay. And finally, this person, right or left? Or stay? Whatever you think. All right, he's going to stay. Okay, you guys, you can just drop those posters and go take your seat again. I very much appreciate your help. I want to tell you guys 3 things about sin that I hope you'll remember. 3 things about sin that, believe it or not, tie back to everything we've done so far. If you're taking notes, you can write these notes in the margins on a page somewhere, on a note page or a journal. The first thing, there's not one sin that's worse than another sin from a heavenly perspective. It's really hard to imagine that. It's hard to imagine that somebody could do the most terrible things that you could ever imagine, and in God's eyes be redeemed the same way that you could. But we'll talk more about that tonight. It doesn't really have to do with us and our performance and our being good and our being bad. It has to do with God and his character. I like to say there's nothing that you can do to make God love you more, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. God's love is about God more than it's about what you do. Now, it is true that different sin has different consequences that we're stuck to live with. So we might make a sin where we end up going to jail. We might make a sin where we break the stereo and it never works again, and we have to live with it that way. We might make a mistake at camp that gets us a talking to with the senior counselor, And we might make another sin at camp that makes us have to go home. So sins do have different degrees of consequences that the Lord will allow us to experience, that the Lord will allow us to live with. But here's how some sins are not worse than other sins. Put on your hat for a second. Try to pretend like I'm going to try to think the way God thinks. God, is it any harder for him to forgive one sin than another? Like, does he break a sweat? Does he start going, maybe not, maybe not, if it's a bad one? No. So you guys, in the sense of, are any sins harder for God to forgive? The answer is no. Do different sins have different consequences? Absolutely, they sure do. And when we're in sin and in our sin nature, that's what keeps us separate from having a relationship with God. So it's so important tonight that we understand his desire to forgive us and his ability to forgive us. No sin is worse from God's point of view. Romans 6:23. Just turn your page, maybe, let's see, in my Bible, it's a couple of pages. Romans 6:23. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. The wages of sin is death. Here's a different way to say it. The wages of sin is separation from God. It's a spiritual death. Everyone has a physical death. We all someday. And there's a spiritual death for people who are not reconciled with God, for people with their sin nature that have not been redeemed and forgiven by God and accepted that free gift. We'll talk about that tonight too. Sin separates us from God. That's the second thing I want you to know about sin. Sin can cause our anxieties to go up. Sin can cause us to lose peace in our minds. Sin can remove our protection. Have you ever read in the Bible about putting on the full armor of God? Sin can remove our protection. We talked a couple days ago about we have a clever enemy who hates us and wants to destroy us, but he's also predictable. We can kind of guess where he's going to go. Sin removes our protection, and we know that there's an enemy that hates us who's trying to derail us. And sin always brings a consequence. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Number 3, the third thing I want you to know about sin, and one of the most important, it's insatiable. Maybe that's a word some of you haven't used before. It's insatiable. It cannot satisfy. It's not enough. What if you were outside doing a game this week and it was super hot, and you know how you exercise so hard, you're like, I have to get a drink of water. I'm going to pass out. I'm so thirsty. And then what if you're drinking the water, and if the water's going down your throat and through your body, it's as if you weren't even drinking it. Like, I'm still thirsty. I'm still thirsty. I'm still thirsty. I still can't breathe. Sin is insatiable. It does not fill you up. It does not give you what you need. There was a guy about 100 years ago, the richest man who ever lived in modern history, and even richer today than like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or any of those people, Elon Musk. And a reporter said, and he was a scoundrel. He was a scoundrel. His family didn't talk to him. He lived in his big mansions all by himself. He was greedy, greedy, greedy. And a reporter said, how much is enough? And he goes, just a little bit more. That's literally the way he thought. Insatiable is when you just can't get enough, when it doesn't satisfy. There's an old story about 2 dogs, and picture, dogs that are bred to be attack dogs, and maybe one's a Doberman Pinscher, and maybe one's a German Shepherd, and you're going to put them in a dog fight, but we don't do that because that's yucky. Which one wins? And the old saying is, well, whichever one you feed. So sin, as we feed it, we give it more and more power, and it becomes more debilitating and more crippling and more anxiety-provoking and more separation from God. But I really want to drill home the point of insatiable with a story that I'll close with about Eskimos and what they do with their problem with wolves. So up in Eskimo land, wherever that is, sometimes at night in these little villages, wolves come in from the woods, and they're looking around for the chicken coops, and they're looking around for the small animals that they want to prey on. And in the morning, these small animals are gone, and there's blood, and it's a big problem. And so the Eskimos have a really interesting way of capturing wolves and protecting their little animals. Think of like the little mini farm here. We want to protect our little animals. They take the sharpest knife that they have, and they sharpen it really, 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 so that even if you bumped it, it would really cut you open. And then they dip it in the blood of whatever kind of animal the wolf is attracted to. And they put it outside in the cold, and it freezes. Then they dip it again. They put it outside. They dip it again. They put it outside. They're making a blood popsicle. And then they go out before night, and they take it right side up. No. They take it right side up, and they plant it in the ground. And that night, when the wolves come, they are attracted to the scent of that blood, and they find it, and they start licking it. And with every lick, the ice, the coldness, is numbing their tongue. So their tongue eventually goes totally numb, and they're enjoying their blood popsicle. But before you know it, they've actually licked through all of the blood, and all that's left is that sharp, sharp knife. And they continue to lick because their tongue is numb. And it's their own blood now that they're drinking. And they drink themselves to death. Isn't that a good illustration, you guys, of sin? Sin numbs us to the pain of our consequences. It's insatiable, like the wolves. They can't get enough. They can't stop, even when their lives depend on it. Is someone here, I think 7th grade or so, Jada? Is Jada here? Jada, on your way out, I've got a box of blood popsicles for you to bring to your, they're real popsicles, to bring to your cabin time. I met your grandma yesterday. When I went into town to buy popsicles, I met your grandma. So you guys can take popsicles with you to your small group time and let it remind you what we talked about today. You guys, we're going to have a really, really fun day, and I'll see you back here tonight. Please have a great cabin time.